Welcome to 10-Minute Record Reviews, episode 50, and to celebrate the big 5-0, we're going to talk about Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers' third album and their breakthrough album from 1979, Damn the Torpedoes. And what I have here is the first US pressing, which sounds pretty good. I'm not totally sold on the production on some of his albums, but you know, it's not bad. And this being a first pressing, this is as good as it gets. It's okay. So what to expect? Well, this is a Tom Petty album. So like all Tom Petty albums, it's anchored fundamentally by great songwriting, which has as much to do with his lyrics and his storytelling and the way that he conveys emotion in his singing, as it has to do with the rock and roll music which accompanies it, which is always good. But this is fundamentally about Petty as a singer and a songwriter, as is so much of his other work. So Tom Petty is from Gainesville, which is kind of towards the north of Florida. It's very much in the south part of Florida, as opposed to the southern, more tropical, more Latin parts of Florida. He is influenced by Elvis and the Beatles, and he, like so many guys of his age, forms a band. His big sort of, musical partner and on and off is a guy called Ben Montench, who of course ultimately is a keyboard player in the Heartbreakers. They're in a band called Mudcrutch. They have other projects to get back together in Heartbreakers in the mid 1970s. By the time of this album, they had two albums out already. They'd had a couple of hits, like American Girl, for instance. So they'd made a bit of an impact, but they were by no means household names, and had were kind of existing at kind of the B-list circles of rock and roll. But this album was their breakthrough. I remember seeing them in, I think it's late in the fall of '79 on Saturday Night Live, and being super impressed with the band and buying their album right away. I actually thought they were punk. I don't know why I thought that, but I was wrong. I found that out when I bought the record, but I still realized this is a good record, and it's got several great songs on it, which you would include on any single LP compilation of his best work. I think if you look at this album in context, I think you could say that one of the reasons that his style of music becomes popular is kind of the same reason why the Eagles have a degree of popularity, Bob Seger and other people in the late 70s, in that, Americans have been through this big trauma of being in a stupid, negative war, which they lose, of course, and there's a bit of a withdrawal and an inwardness, and of course so much of the popular culture and music of the early part of the 70s had been highly socially conscious. Petty is one of these artists that captures the public imagination, arguably for reasons of what he wasn't, as much as what he was. And this is in no way intended as a knock on him or a comment on his political views, of which I know nothing, or anything like that. But I think it's pretty clear that this is not activist music at all. I think Robert Christgau said that this is music that would not disturb your sleep or your conscience or your precious bodily rhythms. That's a little harsh. I think it's clear that's why it's attractive, but I don't think that's something you can fault Petty for. And I think that kind of sneering kind of says more about the Village Voice than it says about Tom Petty. Anyway, enough of that. If there is a message to this music, I think it's not a political message. It's actually an emotional broadcast from Petty about his lack of romantic confidence, and that's a theme which comes again and again out through the lyrics. I think you could say this is music from a wounded heart, if that makes any sense. So we get to side one. It kicks off with "The Refugee," which is the song they played on Saturday Night Live, the first one, which blew me away. I still totally love that song years and years and years later. It's whatever we at 41 years after I saw it. This I think is all about Petty's voice, all about his delivery. And he has those two different kinds of deliveries in this. He's got, during the verses, he's got that sort of surly, tough kid, is standing by by the pool table, kind of sneering almost delivery, but then this kind of almost shouting exhortation during the choruses, and totally great contrast and feeling and moods in that song. fantastic song, great pop song, roared up the charts, and no wonder why, because it's just infectious. And then an immediate change of pace with Here Comes My Girl, which is an homage to the loveliness of his girlfriend, and you know, who can't get behind that? There's these different kind of mood feels and changes, you know, within the song where there's all this sort of spoken word intro, you know, as he talks about his girl. It's totally believable. It's totally honest. It's like this perfect blend of innocent love and lust, you know, interwoven in the same lyrics. Great song. Then Even the Losers, which starts off with this funny little intro with this drumming, and then, you know, you hear this voice say, it's just normal noises in here, whatever, and then off you go into what is really, you know, probably the first, you know, heartland rock, which is a term I really dislike, but it's a heartland rock song on this record, and I don't think that Petty necessarily deserves to be lumped in with Bob Seger, or even Mellencamp for that matter, so much. I think his songwriting is sort of sets him apart from those guys a little bit. But this is not a self-consciously sort of heartland rock piece, which I guess is refreshing, because some of Mellencamp stuff, you know, really was. This is autobiographical. It's self-consciously deprecating, which is very, very common in his lyrics. It's basically a very sweet song about being into somebody who's not into him, and, you know, which is again a feeling you get out of a lot of tunes on this album, but also some of his other work as well. Followed by Shadow of a Doubt, which continues that theme of being strung along, and then the side concludes with Century City, which is I guess, what can you say about this? Well, one of the better songs about you know, arguments over publishing rights, which is apparently what the topic of what, you know, it's a bit obtuse in the you know, as it's sung, but this is all about his lawyers who lived in Century City, apparently. So, and his fights with his label. Side 2 kicks off with a fantastic song, Don't Do Me Like That. I say this, and I mean this in the most positive of ways, because I'm not actually a super big Billy Joel fan, but this could easily be a Billy Joel song, and a very good, you know, one of the better Billy Joel songs. It has that kind of feel. It's got a, you know, this has a real pop sensibility, this song. It's a sort of a scolding kind of relationship-y song, but it's still kind of just leaves you in a good mood because it's so assertive, and you know, it's kind of like standing up for himself, which sounds like it doesn't always do in these circumstances. I think the verses are also really well written here, and it has a very Beatlesy middle eight. This is his third release, this album, and you could tell that the craft of songwriting has really he's really settled into it very well, I think. Followed up by You Tell Me, another song about being strung along by a woman. So this is like the third or fourth time we've revisited this theme. So either he's you know, flexing about the same relationship again and again, or this is a, you know, a bit of a chronic thing he's had to encounter. What Are You Doing in My Life, which is about being stalked by a delusional groupie. Interesting lyrical theme. It's a song, actually, I think kind of forgettable, frankly, despite the theme. And then the album closes out with Louisiana Rain. This is like country rock, but if the lyrics were written by Ray Davies. It's got some great slide guitar. This was apparently written at Leon Russell's house, because Petty, I guess, there was some brief tenure where Petty was an assistant to Leon Russell, and while he was hanging out at his house, this is where the song was written. The lyrics I find kind of a little obscure. You couldn't really call this a storytelling song, but it's got a very memorable chorus. So I give this album 4 to 5 stars. It's a strong album whose deeper cuts don't really in any way reach the heights of the best 3 or 4 songs in the album, so it's uneven. He would only go on to improve as a songwriter, but if you're jumping into Tom Petty's discography, for me, this is the most significant early place to jump in.